It was fall in Colorado. The aspens were turning deep yellow gold, and early snows were covering the mountaintops. It was on a September day when Scott and Jean Johnson welcomed my photographer and I to a remote piece of their ranch. Their cattle roamed in the distance. Pikes Peak was the backdrop. Scott and Jean anchored the fourth generation of the Flying Diamond Ranch, headquartered at Kit Carson, out on Colorado's high eastern plains, 150 miles southeast of Denver. We met Jean and Scott on horses. Well, allow me to clarify. They were on horses. We were trailing in a Jeep. My daughter, who's a barrel racer, will eagerly inform anyone who asks of my subpar horse skills. My name is Dan Miller, and I write for Progressive Farmer. This story of Scott and Jean Johnson and their family appears in the May 2019 issue of Progressive Farmer. Early in my interview, Scott corrected me on a point he was making. I'll begin this story there. "You missed that," he said, a bit frustrated. Indeed, I had grass management in my head, and I had missed his point about holistic management. It is more than grass. The template of holistic management laid over the Johnson family's Flying Diamond Ranch is a collaboration of moving parts. It considers the harsh seasons of Colorado's semi-arid plains, and it considers grass, but it also considers management of predatory coyotes, of spring calving, and scrutiny of meat markets. Most of all, holistic management is about family. This one now early into its sixth generation with a crop of new babies. If our ROI, our return on investment, Scott says, is great, but someone is maimed, we wouldn't be real proud of our performance. We will give up profit for safety or harmony, he explains. The focus is on the whole. If we're not getting along as a family, if we're not safe, then the rest of this really doesn't matter, he says. But Flying Diamond is still a business, bottom line and profit oriented. Flying Diamond is 112 years old. Charlie Collins, Scott's great-grandfather, fell in love with this land when, as a teen in the late 1800s, he trailed cattle near the banks of Big Sandy Creek on a drive from Mexico to Montana. By 1907, Collins moved his family from Kansas to Kit Carson. This ranch is dominated by a shortgrass and sand sage landscape. Thick riparian areas border Big Sandy and Horse Creeks. They are both tributaries of the Arkansas River. Culls are based on a female's ability to wean a calf every year beginning at age 2 and succeed in 13 inches of precipitation and temperatures running the scale from below 0 to above 100 degrees. The composite Angus herd winters on corn circles in Kansas and Nebraska to give the grasses a winter rest. Flying Diamond is an operation run by a family of Type A personalities. We're not real chit-chatters, Scott admits. Ownership is based on a meritocracy, and that's an interesting word here, and I'll tell you what it means. It means the more a family member contributes, the more they own. Business is organized around communications, face-to-face, weekly conference calls, a monthly executive committee meeting. Quarterly board meetings are newer. Kurt Samuelson, Scott's cousin, retired from senior management at a Fortune 500 company. He brought the structured concept of board meetings to the ranch. Kurt and Scott are co-chairmen of the board. 10 years ago, I was the dictator, Scott says. Now, no one is comfortable with that. Formal board meetings have a structured agenda. They often include talks by outside experts. Assignments are given before the meetings: budgets, range management, cattle movements, fertility testing, branding, and new market opportunities. There is an element of accountability brought into the operation that we didn't have before, Jean said. The goal is consensus. At the end of the day, we want to come up with a compromise we can all live with, Scott says. A day might stretch into weeks, but the goal is always the same. New 2 is a continuing education standard of 300 hours per year for the ranch, and it's an interesting concept. It works out to be about an hour a week for each of the family members, but the idea is to bring practices, skills, and new ideas back into the ranch kind of on a continual basis. For example, Jean organized a horsemanship seminar for some of the folks on the ranch that aren't as familiar with riding. So the idea was to bring that safety element back into the ranch. Back to the story. Calving here runs from March through May. We calve when the deer and the antelope and the elk calve, Scott says. Cows graze on spring grasses and not supplemental feed. Spring calves generally miss late season blizzards, and coyotes have a wider menu of prey in the spring as the grass greens up. Cattle graze only 5% of the ranch's ground at any one time. Nearly 200 miles of single-strand electric interior fence, water lines, and trough support the ranch's paddocks, and each of those paddocks is typically less than 300 acres in size. Stocking rates, once 40 acres per cow-calf unit, are trending down toward 20 acres per cow-calf unit. The family has an eye to tightening its grazing practices, that the cattle will graze on no more than 1% of the ranch's acreage at any one time. Flying Diamond Ranch has won its share of acclaim, a Leopold Award, an Environmental Stewardship Award from the Cattlemen's Association. But awards recognize achievement. Flying Diamond tests new futures. Its organic cuts of meat, for example, are finding popularity in San Francisco restaurants. It's a small part of the business, but something they hope to grow. As a member of the advisory committee for the College of Agricultural Sciences at Colorado State University, Gene has learned about, of all things, meatless meat. It sounds like science fiction to us, but maybe it's something that's coming. Gene is not quickly disregarding a future perhaps born in a petri dish. But the future does not discourage Flying Diamond. We're bullish on agriculture, Scott says. We think that future is pretty bright. And that's the end of this story for this podcast. To read about the Johnsons and testing new futures in its entirety, go to our digital edition at dtnpf.com or find this story in your May 2019 issue of Progressive Farmer magazine.